So thanks for introducing me. My name is Spiss. I'm coming from the Isola group, and I'm not supposed to be here. No, let's say it different. My colleague was supposed to be here, but he then figured out that his brother is getting married these days and that he couldn't come. So that's why I'm jumping in to hold the presentation. What is it driven from, or why have we been looking into it? Previously, I used to work for Arup, specifying a lot of coatings, helping the architects in designing their buildings, and we quite often had the challenge on how do we specify coating, which coatings do we want to use, and how are they going to look? Because we all know they are changing the appearance during the day or over the time. So I just quickly want to tell you something about the basics of how we look at colors, how colors are created, and then show you some data that we figured out by analyzing different coatings under different angles and the different light conditions, and yeah, obviously sum it all up and tell you some of the recommendations that we have on how to view coatings if you want to put it on a project. Okay, the understanding of color and the influence of color perception. It appears to be quite simple. We have a light source, which on buildings is mostly the sunlight, and then it hits a surface. In our case, it's the glass surface, which then apparently reflects some light to the human eye, and we think that's what we see, which is roughly correct. But when you look at it in more detail, it becomes more complicated because actually some light goes through, it hits the interior, some of the light is absorbed, and the body color will also have an impact on it, and then the interior starts reflecting light back outwards. So it's not just when we look at the glass in one stage in front of a white surface or in front of a black surface. The reality is much more complex. So the light source always changes. We have different types of sky. We have a blue one, or we have another blue one, which is not very obvious on the presentation, but we have different types of skies which are emitting different types of light. And then we potentially have quite dark or gray skies. When it's very cloudy, then we have very little color in the original light source. And when we have the blue lights, we quite often have a high content of polarized light in it. What is polarized light? Most of you know about it. Originally, the light source, the light ray, is swinging in all directions. And once it hits a molecule, it starts to split up. And it can be either partially polarized, as we have it up here, or when it's reflected kind of perpendicular to the original light ray, it will be fully polarized light. So those conditions are changing all the time, every day, and throughout the year. And one very simple test how to figure it out, do I have a high content of polarized light or not, is just to take two polarized filters, cross them over. So you can see here they are crossed over, it's blocking out the light. And one is getting dark, one stays bright, which means when you just hold it and turn around once, you know where is kind of the biggest amount of polarized light coming along. Let's keep talking a little bit more about the polarized light. Polarized light also is created when the light source hits a surface, for example, water. And when it hits the surface, it splits up. And what it shows us here on this graph is when the light source hits it with about 60 degrees, and that's the case of when it hits the glass surface, it polarizes completely. It blocks out the red arrow completely, and we have only the orange arrow left in reflection. So we get significant differences in the lights which will be reflected off our building and which will influence the appearance of our building in this case. Yeah, so that's just a description again of the two graphs. What are you going to see when the incident of the angle of incident is going to change? There is the effective polarization, which is a product of the intensities of the different angles. And what we want to show you here is a picture that we took, or two pictures that we took on 2 different days with different levels of polarization. And you can see a clear difference in the visual appearance. It's the same building, it's the same time, it's just a different level of polarization. The polarized light also has a side effect, which is the anisotropy of toughened glass, which I do not want to explain in detail, but if you have heat strengthened or fully toughened glass units, you get an additional visual effect on the glass units because you will see the embedded stresses within the glass. Okay, let's get to the perception of the human eye or how we see colors. So people can't remember color very well. If I give you a red today and you think it's nice, I can give you the same red tomorrow and you think it's probably not nice. Don't ask me why it is like this, but it's scientifically proved that we can't remember colors very well. Our eyes get tired. When we look at colors for a while, our eyes start to perceive the colors in a different way. There is color blindness for some of us, and the viewing conditions, which I already mentioned before. Yeah, so we have 3 different details, let's say. We have once the brightness, which is less critical. We can work with the brightness to a certain extent. But then we have the chroma and the hue of the color. So if we have 2 colors, 2 green, if we have a green and a red, then we're quite able to distinguish them. If we have 2 greens, then we can't say, well, this is green or that is green. We need those 2 greens next to each other that we can say, well, this is more green or this is less green. And if we have the brightness as well, then we need an additional sample that we can say, well, this is darker or this is brighter. Let's look at this gray stripe. Do we agree that this is a homogeneous gray stripe? Does anybody see anything else? No, so I'll take it no answer is a yes. We all see a gray stripe. Do we all believe that this gray stripe still is homogeneous? It was homogeneous, it is still homogeneous, but our eyes might start tricking us now. You can do that also with colors, but then it's getting more critical and different people start seeing different colors. So I spared the color experiment, but I wanted to show you this one. Do you all see the white spots in the middle of the squares? Yeah, all clear. Everybody sees it. You have no flickering. They're not changing between black and white. They're constantly white. Okay, so just a short example. What we see is really, really very, very individual. I mean, we can measure it now, the white spots, obviously, but what we think that we see is very, very individual. LAB color space, I don't think that I need to explain too much about it. We have, again, the brightness on the vertical axis, and then we have the B-axis, which goes from yellow to blue, and the y-axis, which goes from green to red. This is how we currently specify coatings. This is how most of the specifications are written nowadays. This is, I would say, more or less the industry standard that we're working to. And then we can print our coatings into this color space. We can say, oh, I have a color that is right here. That's on the b-axis at -7 and on the a-axis as -1, for example. That's a specification for our coating. And we also get tolerances. And the tolerances are built as a square. Whoop, sorry. They're built as a square around this one dot. We specify a dot, and then we build a square around it and say that's the tolerances in which this coating should be. So then there is also another system, CMC. And CMC takes into consideration the human perception. And let me explain a little bit about this graphic here. You can see that the outer ovals are quite large, especially here in the green area. And up here in the red area, orange area, they get very narrow because we start to get more sensitive in this area. And then they also get very small. Once we come into this neutral field, they start to become very small because we pick up color differences in this area very quickly. And this is where it becomes kind of tricky when we start talking about coatings and different light conditions. Again, here you can see the different sizes of the ellipses. These were the two original coatings. So coating A, it wouldn't be as dramatic if it shifts off slightly because you wouldn't pick it up. Coating B is already in a smaller ellipse, so you start picking it up much quicker. The understanding of the color, and I presume that's pretty basic, I don't want to explain it very much. Depending on where it reflects more in the blue area or in the green area, that's what we're going to see. And we did some measurements with the X-Rite ERX65, and we did those measurements under different angles and light conditions. So we had the viewing angles of 15 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. And we did it with polarized light, linear polarized, unpolarized, and then the polarization was once perpendicular to the glass surface and once parallel to the glass surface. Okay? During the presentation, you might see that perpendicular is also described as vertical, just for you to know. And then we took different glass samples and started looking on what's happening with different glass samples, how are they behaving. So we took one clear sheet and then different coatings, especially double silver coatings and triple silver coatings, because we wanted to understand how are they behaving. So we analyzed the clear glass under the just described conditions, 15, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees, and under the different polarization levels. And what we can see is that the values are quite close together. They are not perfectly together, which they kind of should be, but they are not perfectly together, because when we start using a polarized filter, the polarized filter by itself has also a color. So we couldn't eliminate the color of the polarized filter, but they're reasonably close together. And to show you how it behaves in a bigger scale, it's absolutely sufficient. Yeah, we see a rather small square around the area of our measurements, and then we started looking at the double silver coated glass units. And we can see that those values are spreading out much more. When we start with the unpolarized light, the measurements are much closer together, unpolarized and polarized under a normal angle, almost perpendicular to the surface. And when we then start changing the degree, the values are shifting apart quite significantly. So the same coating will appear in all of those different colors. And we're showing those colors again on the LAB system because that's what we are working to. But literally the same coating viewed at different angles and at different light conditions can be once yellowish green and can be once purple. It's all the same coating, and the specification that we use to specify a coating says that spot and the little square around it, which is, when we look at it in reality, much more. Yeah, that's kind of the worst case then. The distance, the sum of the distances is quite big, and we can put a square around it just to get a feeling how is it behaving. We use different coatings. Again, a double silver coating to show the differences. Another double silver coating. And the square seems reasonably small. And then we go to triple silver coatings. And very important is, I do not want to say that the triple silver coating is in general worse than a double silver coating. You can't just say that simply out of those charts. There needs to be, you just need to look at the details of it. But what we can see here is that it got quite big. The describing square got quite big around it. The distance in between the individual worst measurements are pretty equal. Another triple silver coating, the distance gets much larger in between the individual measurements. And then we thought we found a very, very good triple silver coating. We were delighted when we made those measurements. We said, well, that's amazing. This must be a really good triple silver coating. Please remember A05. Okay? That's the important one for you to remember. A05 is a really good triple silver coating. The values are reasonably close to each other. The distance appears to be all right. The square appears to be quite small. But what we have, it is right in the center. This is where we are most sensitive. And then we started to look at the glass samples kind of under real conditions. Well, real is relatively because we always have different conditions. We put them on black felt to eliminate kind of the influence of internal reflections. The reflection is black, so we have no reflections from the internal side. And looked at it at different angles, 10 degrees and 60 degrees. And then we started looking at those units under different light conditions. Parallel polarized light and vertically perpendicular polarized light. And then we started comparing them. And the charts that I just showed you before, the graphs that I showed you before, are of those glass units. They're exactly the same glass units. And here you have the measurement A5, which we considered when we first looked at the graph, oh, that must be a really good coating because all the values are very close to each other. But the reality is that there is quite a huge shift within the glass unit. So we can see the double silver and the triple silver coating. There is a degree where they are slightly more sensitive just because of the architecture of the coating. But depending on in which area of the color field you are, it's more critical or less critical, kind of. Summary. Glass facade with selective coatings does not have a constant visual appearance. Yes, because the light conditions are changing. The angle of the sun is changing, the time of the year is changing. We might have clouds, we might have a bright sky. It's constantly changing. The background, everything around it has a huge influence. Selective coatings are sensitive on the polarization level of the light. And depending on where it is within the color space, we see more differences or less. And yeah, what we recognized as well, the triple silver coatings kind of have a slightly lower color rendering index as well in general. What are the recommendations? On a project, get a piece of glass on hand samples, you get a feeling, then increase the size. You're completely unable to judge the color of a sample when it's kind of hand format 20 by 30 centimeters. It's impossible. Increase the size, then you get a better color impression, view it on the outside, and also start building a mock-up where you're imitating the building by itself. Build a box, build a room in the background with the office space, for example, or with the hotel space, and imitate what's going to happen in these buildings, because it will have a significant influence. What is rather difficult to imitate is the different light conditions. So the only way to figure that out is to go there on different times of the day, on different days, and then start rotating the mock-up. Because there is a difference between an east, west, north, and south facade. It will change constantly on the appearance. Yeah, that's it. That's the summary of my colleague Herman Dehner. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much at first. And we have time for 1 or 2 questions if there are.
Hi, Hannes. Did you consider also any single silver coatings during this study?
We did. We didn't show it on the display because the impact was just lower. They're just less sensitive, let's say. The sensitivity as it increased from the double silver to the triple silver, the sensitivity also goes down when you have a single silver.
And did you do any studies with, I'm assuming this is done with a 6 millimeter thickness of the glass, or?
I think they were all 6 millimeter glasses, yeah. 6 millimeter solar control coatings, yeah.
So did you do any studies of what's the impact of the different interlayers and the impact of the different layers of glass, or even the impact of different low iron suppliers?
No, we didn't. We know that it has an impact. What we did there is we only showed you 6 measurements. I think we did 50 measurements, 50 to 60 measurements. So we analyzed kind of the whole market to see what's happening, how all the different suppliers, what are they achieving, where are they? But we haven't gone into that depth. We created a whole lot of data that you then have to evaluate and figure out what is it, and no, we didn't go into any further depths right now.
Okay, another question?
Do you have any recommendation how to design the coating to be less sensitive?
No, I don't. But this is the question that should be asked to my colleague who is a coating engineer. So unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't answer it. But I mean, it's really looking at it and measuring it as we did it. I mean, these are the worst case scenarios that we have, because we always have 100% polarization perpendicular and parallel. But right now, I don't see any other way to do it. I mean, I was with a specifying company, we wanted to specify it, but nobody told us what happens with coatings under different light conditions. So that was, to me, the first step now to say, watch out when you look at coatings, when you want to specify coatings, really look at the details. It's not just, oh, I like this color spot, and I draw a square around it, and that's what I get. We are far away from that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Hannes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Hi there. Did you like what you just saw? If you did, why don't you like the video, drop us a comment below, and share the video as well, since GPD is all about sharing. And to receive more videos in future, subscribe to this channel and don't forget to click the bell icon. Ciao!